What's up, airplane collectors? Welcome to a long-awaited video. It's your host, Ray. In today's video, two legendary models will finally go nose to nose, and one will reign supreme. Today I'll be comparing two 1 to 400 scale Delta Airlines 757-200s with winglets. On the left side, we have our first competitor, the Gemini Jets version. Having been released in 2018, many collectors can agree that it's about time for a re-release. Unfortunately, Gemini says no. However, NG was listening, and our competitor on the right side, which is NG, decided to finally release their version in 2022. 4 years apart, two completely different models and manufacturers. Let's see who did it better. I'll be judging these two models through a system of categories and points. There are 10 total categories where I'll be comparing both models, each of which has a maximum of 5 points. And at the end, I'll add up all of the points that both models have earned, and the one with the highest amount of points wins the competition. Let's get this party started. So this competition begins with box art. We'll start with evaluating the Gemini version. The Gemini version is pretty interesting. It's rather bland. There isn't really anything special, but it's also a simple design, with the only special touch being this Delta Airlines logo right here. However, in my opinion, it seems a little bit out of place. Going around the box, the theme is pretty much the same. It is somewhat vibrant, and it will match all of the other Gemini models you have in your fleet, but aside from that, it isn't really anything special. We've seen this for many years now. In contrast, the NG version has a unique and one and only design, since NG makes all of their box arts, not only this model, from scratch. And while I do appreciate the fact that NG did this box art from scratch, I'm not exactly the biggest fan of it due to the fact that the design is rather simple. It's just two Delta Airlines logos. So even though NG's is unique, I'm going to give it a 4. I'm just going to take off a point since I really don't like the box art too much. The Gemini version, however, I'm going to have to be a bit more cruel on that one, and I'm going to give it a 2 due to the fact that it's really plain and there's nothing really special about the box art. Now getting to the models themselves, our next category is the fuselage. I'll start by evaluating specific parts of each airplane and the parts of the fuselage. On the left side we have the Gemini version, and on the right side we have the NG version. The left side, the Gemini version, the nose shape is really nice. It matches the 757 pretty well, so this will definitely help Gemini earn some points. On the right side, the NG version, while it is pretty nice, it isn't exactly shaped the best, in my opinion. For example, what I mean is the curve from the cockpit window section to the rest of the nose cone. It's not as sharp and defined as the one on the Gemini version. It's still good nonetheless, but the Gemini one is going to win over this one. We'll move down the rest of the fuselage for the Gemini one, and it's still pretty solid nonetheless. I have no complaints. There is, of course, not really that much detail to put on there, but it is unfortunately hurt by the fact that it's on a cradle mold. There is 2 noticeable seams on both the sides and the bottom of the aircraft. When you're looking at the aircraft from the top or the side, it's hard to see the seams, but once you hit the bottom, they're very easy to define. So there they are. Now for the NG version, you can see a bit more fuselage detail on this fuselage. You can see the crease here, which is accurate to the 757. There's a bit more of a defined curve around the wing section. Same deal back here. Overall, a bit more fuselage detail. And another plus on this one is that this one is not on a cradle mold. So there isn't any ugly seam lines on the bottom of the fuselage. It's just one fuselage piece. This is a very hard decision to make, but I did think about this for a while. The Gemini fuselage, while the nose is pretty good, it really doesn't have any other redeeming qualities against the NG version. It's still good nonetheless, so I'm going to give it a 4. But I deducted a point due to the fact that it has the cradle mold. The NG version is really solid. There's a lot more molded detail. The nose shape isn't the best. It's a very small detail. Honestly, it's better than the Gemini version, and it's still good nonetheless, so I'm going to give it a 5. Next category is the wings. This is also going to be a very hard category to judge since both of the wings on both models are very nicely done. The left one, the Gemini version, appears to have more detail, especially with the exit door markings, but keep in mind the NG version is one of the 4-door variants on the side without the overwing exits, so there is no need for overwing exit markings. Both of them are really good. Honestly, I don't think anyone is better than the other. The Gemini version might be a little bit better, but that's considering printed detail, and I'm only going to be talking about the shape of the wings and their winglets. And I think the winglets in this situation are going to be the deciding factor. The Gemini version's winglets are very nicely done. They're nicely shaped, however, they are a little bit small. One thing that they do have on the NG version is that the winglet light here is represented by a little dot, and this is actually absent on the NG version. However, the Gemini version winglets are unfortunately a little shorter than they should be. Now on the NG version, on the other hand, if my camera would focus there, you can see the winglets are the right size. However, the tips and the overall shape of the winglets aren't the best. Or not the overall shape, but just the tip here isn't as well defined on the Gemini version. So I'm going to dock points on both models for that, and we'll see which one wins. Another factor I'd like to evaluate is wing flex. This is definitely not a problem for both models. The wing flex on both of them is pretty much flawless, so therefore I will not be mentioning wing flex in my final decision. So to conclude, the Gemini version's winglets and the wing shape themselves, they're pretty good. The only issue is the winglet size, so I'm going to take a point off for that, and the fact that it's on the cradle mold also impacts the wings. You can see the seam between the wing and the fuselage itself right here, so I'm going to give it a 4. It's still pretty good nonetheless. The NG version is also solid, but the winglets are also a problem since the shape of them is kind of weird and it's sometimes inconsistent. So I'm going to give the wings on the NG version a 4 as well. Moving on to the vertical stabilizer. The vertical stabilizer on both models is really nice. However, the Gemini one does not have as much molded detail as the NG one. The shapes are correct, the heights are relatively the same. They're just only different by a very slight amount, and that's pretty much negligible if you're not paying too much attention. So the determining factor here will be molded details, since everything else looks fine. The Gemini version simply doesn't have as many molded details as the NG version, so the Gemini version will get a 4, and the NG version will get a 5. Pretty easy decision on that one. Our next category is horizontal stabilizers, and it looks like it's going to be the same conclusion as the vertical stabilizer. The Gemini ones are pretty good, so are the NG ones. They're pretty much identical. The flex on both of them is acceptable and it's accurate. However, the NG one is more detailed, so I'm going to give the Gemini one a 4 for not having as much detail, and the NG one a 5 since it has more detail. Here are the Gemini version's engines. The engines look pretty solid. They're shaped nicely, the detail in the fan blades is also really good, and the clearance relative to the ground is acceptable, so very nicely done on Gemini's part. Here are the engines on the NG version. The fan blade detail looks pretty good, and you can see it's a bit more shaded than the Gemini version. However, the shape of the engines is rather questionable. You can see a noticeable dent here instead of a more forward curve, if you will. There's a significant dent here that isn't present on the real 757 engine, and you can see that the exhaust nozzle here, 1, is inaccurate in terms of its coloring, and 2, it's not exactly aligned with the rest of the engine, so that's definitely going to hurt the points on this one. Both aircraft have solid engines, but on this one, I'm going to have to say Gemini takes the cake. Their engines get a 5, and the NG ones, I'm going to have to give them a 3 due to the messed up shape and the exhaust nozzle issues. Our next category is aerial features, such as Wi-Fi domes and antennas. Here's the Gemini version, and they're pretty solid. There's only antennas on the top of the aircraft, and there is a missing antenna here on the bottom of the aircraft. So the fact that it's missing is going to cost it a point. So far it's down to 4 out of 5, but aside from that, everything else looks pretty solid. You can kind of see the antennas are bent to the left, so I'm going to I want to dock a point for that as well. So I'm going to do a 3 out of 5 on antennas and aerial features. Wi-Fi dome looks good. It doesn't exactly adhere to the aircraft too well, so that also explains that 3 out of 5 instead of 4 out of 5. Now for the NG version, you can see the Wi-Fi dome configuration is a little different since it's a more up-to-date version, but I won't be judging each airplane based off of that. The NG version does everything pretty nicely. The antenna might be a little small, but it's still good. It's lined up very nicely, and the antenna on the bottom of the both antennas at the bottom of the aircraft, I didn't see the one here in the rear, are present. So I'm going to give this one a 5 out of 5. Now let's explore the landing gear. The landing gear on the Gemini version can be seen here. The nose wheel is nicely done. The tilt backwards towards the rear section of the aircraft is accurately portrayed. And the main gear look really nice. Lots of detail on both the nose and the main gear. The wheels roll nicely on the main gear. However, the nose one is pretty much stopped, so that's kind of messed up. But either way, that's not really a feature I've come to expect. But very nicely detailed on the Gemini version. I'm going to give these a 5 out of 5. I should also mention that the gear balance on the model is very nicely done. It's even, and the model sits parallel to the ground, so that also contributes to its 5 out of 5. Now for the NG version. The NG version is pretty solid. Detail is nice. You can see a lot of detail on the main landing gear as well as the nose gear. However, on the nose gear, the tilt back is not portrayed, and it actually appears to tilt forward. So that's going to cost the NG version a point. The main landing gear are pretty solid though, and the wheels do not roll on this one. Oh, wait, why are they rolling? Okay, earlier they weren't rolling, but now they're rolling. But either way, if they roll or don't roll, it's not going to contribute much. So I'm going to deduct a point. These get a 4 out of 5. Now for printed details. There is a lot of printed details on both models, but straight away I'm going to say NG takes the cake on this one since NG has a lot more printed details than the Gemini version, most notably on the bottom of the aircraft, which I will demonstrate to you right now. So in my right hand is the NG version, and my left hand is the Gemini version. You can see straight away that there's more printed detail on the NG version than the Gemini version. I'll try and show you guys up close. It's kind of hard to do, but I guess it's one of those things that you're going to have to trust me with since the darn camera doesn't want to focus. So I'm going to give NG a 5 out of 5 and the Gemini version a 4 out of 5. Our next category is quality control, and this one will be a little bit more extensive. The quality control in the Gemini version was outstanding. I noticed no paint defects. The wheels not rolling is not exactly, or it is kind of quality control, but it's not a terrible sin, so I'm going to forgive it on both models. But yeah, the Gemini version had no paint chips, no printing issues, pretty much nothing, and that applied to virtually the whole batch. I don't remember seeing any broken models from this one or defective models. So Gemini, ironically, even though I really don't like them on this channel very much, I'm going to give them a 5 out of 5 on the quality control, because Gemini does do good occasionally, and they've been kind of improving recently. The NG version, however, is a different story. I've heard many different instances of the models arriving damaged, and unfortunately, it kind of shows NG's quality control is going down. The engine shape is kind of messed up as well, and earlier, while I was making a first version of this video, I noticed there was concerning paint chips on the vertical stabilizer. So, due to all of the broken models I've been hearing about, and these paint chips, which were rather concerning, and of course the winglet issues, I'm going to give the quality control in the NG version a 3 out of 5. And now, the point you have all been waiting for, the final decision. So far, both models did good in some spots, in some places they didn't. And before I make my final decision, and I'm going to repeat this at the end, both of these models in the end are great model aircraft. They have their pros and cons, but I would recommend both equally to any other collector. Now, let's evaluate the points. First, with the Gemini version. The box, 2 points. For the fuselage, wings, vertical, and horizontal stabilizers, those all get 4 points. The engines get 5 points. Aerial features get 3. Gear get 5 points. Printed details get 4. Quality control gets 5. With a final total of 40 points, doing pretty solid, 10 points less than the maximum, I think that's a pretty solid win. Now for the NG version. The NG version gets 4 points for the box, 5 points for the fuselage. Wings get 4 points, vertical and horizontal stabilizers both get 5 points, engines get 3 points, aerial features get 5, gear get 4, printed details get 5. Quality control gets 3. That's a final score of 43 points. In the end, the NG version wins this competition. Now I'm going to repeat what I said earlier. Both of these models are great, and honestly, I recommend both. But in this circumstance, the NG version wins. Well, thank you so much for watching. If you disagree or if you have something to say, I highly encourage that you voice that in the comment section. That way other collectors can also receive an insight as to your opinions about which version is better and whatnot, and other factors that I left out of this video. As always, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, and subscribe. Stay tuned for more comparisons since I have another one in the works. And stay tuned for more airplane, siren, and eventually rocket content. See you guys later.